Chapter 3. How Jean was brought to Fairnilee. The winter went by very sadly. At first the people about Fairnilee expected the English to cross the border and march against them. They drove their cattle out on the wild hills and into marshes where only they knew the firm paths, and raised walls of earth and stone, barricades they called them, around the house, and made many arrows to shoot out of the narrow windows at the English. Randal used to like to see the arrow-making beside the fire at night. He was not afraid, and said he would show the English what he could do with his little bow. But weeks went on, and no enemy came. Spring drew near, and snow melted from the hills. And one night Randal was awakened by a great noise of shouting. He looked out the window, and he saw bright torches moving about. He heard the cows routing and bellowing, and the women screaming. He thought the English had come. So they had. Not the English army, but some robbers from the other side of the border. At that time the people on the south side of Scotland and the north side of England used to steal each other's cows about time. When a Scotch squire or laird, like Randal's father, had been robbed by the neighboring English, he would wait his chance to drive away the cattle from the English side. This time most of Randal's mother's herds were seized by a sudden attack in the night, and were driven away through the forests to England. 2 or 3 of Lady Care's men were hurt by the English, but old Simon Grieve took a prisoner. He did this in a curious way. He shot an arrow after the robbers as they rode off, and an arrow pinned the Englishman's leg to his saddle, and even to his horse. The horse was hurt and frightened, and ran away right back to Fairnilee, where it was caught, with the rider and all, for of course he could not dismount. They treated him kindly at Fairnilee, though they laughed at him a good deal. They found out from him where the English had come from. He did not mind telling them, for he really was a gipsy from Yetholm, where the gypsies live, and a Scot or Southron was all one to him. When old Simon Grieve knew who the people were that had taken the cows, he was not long in calling the men together and trying to get back what he had lost. Early one April morning, a grey morning, with snow in the air, he and his spearmen set out, riding down through the forest and into Liddesdale. When they came back again, there were great rejoicings in Fairnilee. They drove most of their own cows before them, and a great many other cows that they had not lost, cows of the English farmers. The byres and yards were soon full of cattle, lowing and roaring, very uneasy, and some of them with marks of spears that had goaded them across many hills of ford, and many a rocky pass in the hills. Randal jumped downstairs to the great hall where his mother sat. Simon Grieve was telling her all about it. "I can drive on poor I can, my lady," he said, "and the Alban's some o'er ains that was born our ain. For by the racket and the plenishing hoots, and the hartering, and a bonny burden of tapestries and plaids, and here we had to show for a ride." We drove our own cattle home, and perhaps some others that are not ours, and we took all the goods out of the hall of hard riding, and a pretty load of tapestries and rugs and other things we have to show for our ride. Then he called to some of his men, who came into the hall, and cast down great piles of all sorts of spoil and booty, silver plate and silken hangings, and a heap of rugs and carpets and plaids, such as Randal had never seen before, for the English were much richer than the Scotch. Randal threw himself on the pile of rugs and began to roll on it. "Oh, mother," he cried suddenly, jumping up and down with wide eyes open, "there's something living in the heap, perhaps a doggy or a rabbit or a kitten." Then Randal tugged at the clothes, and then they all heard a loud, shrill cry. "Why, it's a bairn!" said Lady Care, who sat very grave all this time, pleased to have done the English some harm, for they had killed her husband, and were all her deadly foes. "It's the bairn!" she cried, and pulled out a heap of cloaks and rugs, and a little beautiful child in its white nightdress, with its yellow curls all tangled over its blue eyes. Then Lady Care and the old nurse could not make much of the pretty English child that had come there in such a wonderful way. How did it get mixed up with all the spoil, and how had it been carried so far on horseback without being hurt? Nobody even knew. It came as if the fairies had sent it. English it was, and the best Scot could not hate such a pretty child. Old Nancy Dryden ran up to the old nursery with it, then laid it in a great wooden tub full of hot water, and was giving it warm milk to drink, and dandling it, before the men knew what had happened. "The Aunt Bairn will be a bonny mate for you, Maister Randal," said the old Simon Grieve. "'Deed, I dinna think her kin will come for spearing after her at Fairnilee. The red cock's crowing over Hardenby's way this way. And when the women folk come back frae in the wood, there'll nae be other things for the go fire down the barns." When Simon Greaves said that the red cock was crowing over the enemy's home, he meant that he had set it on fire after the people who lived in it had run away. Lady Care grew pale when she heard what he said. She hated the English for sure, but she was a woman with a kind heart. She thought of the dreadful danger that the little English girl had escaped, and she went upstairs and helped the nurse to make the child happy.